Welcome to the Real Estate Power Play Podcast, your launch pad for skyrocketing success in real estate investing. I'm your host, Gabe Rodarte, alongside Mark Monroe. We're ready to bring you transformative stories, groundbreaking strategies, and the insider secrets of real estate giants. Get ready to accelerate your investment journey and become a true power player in the world of real estate. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the Real Estate Power Play Podcast. Today, my name is Gabe Rodarte. I am your host, and I also have my good friend Kevin here.
What's up, Gabe?
What's happening, brother? He just was an awesome blessing. Had me on his podcast a little while ago. We got to connect on some other topics, and I wanted to bring him on as a guest for us to really share and give back to our community and the multiple things he does. And my otter is now recording you. That's awesome. Okay. So, man, how you been?
I'm doing great, dude. I'm excited to be here. You know, we got to know each other a while back, and it's been fun watching your ride and your success. So I'm just happy to be here and talk to you about it.
Yes, this is going to be exciting. So what area of the country are you in? Are you in the beautiful weather right now? Is that what's happening?
It is beautiful here. I'm right outside of Denver, Colorado. So we're about 75 degrees and sunny.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Wow. So, so you mainly do you do lending, and let's just go to that. So what do you do? Let's share with the audience and for those people that are listening who just want more of an impact, because we're going to dig in some cool stuff in a little bit. But what do you do? Let's share about what you do.
Yeah, I'm going to take you back quick, Gabe, because I think you and I have a similar story in that we started out in single family residential properties. And I learned how to do, I learned how to buy a property or two properties a month while in college and working. And I did that because I learned the creative financing strategy. So I would literally go belly to belly, you know, in someone's living room, sit down with them and try to negotiate to buy their property. So a lot of lease options, a lot of owner financing, subject tos, all of these fun terms that a lot of us don't even understand what they are. And we could talk about all those terms, what I just threw out there. But the important thing here is that I was doing creative financing strategy as this young kid. And I just fell in love with real estate, Gabe, and I just fell in love with the financing side of real estate. Look, the financing has everything to do with the deal structure. So how you negotiate it, how you write the offers, how you communicate with your seller has everything to do with where the money is coming from. So I just gravitated towards that side of the industry. There's lots of ways to make money in real estate. I just happen to fall into the finance side of it.
That's beautiful.
So now we raise private capital and we loan it out to real estate investors. So we have a mortgage fund, hard money, if you want to call it that, although that term is frowned on in the industry. But yeah, we're a hard money, short-term value add bridge lender.
That's fun. So let's dive into something real quick. And I think that's amazing. So as a young person, meaning early 20s, is that where you're just jumped in? Sounds like
Yeah,
it.
so I was we jumped through that fairly quickly, but I was in the military. I was in the Army. And
oh, wow. Okay.
so I was saving up some money. You don't have a lot of expenses when you're in the military, and I'm pretty frugal. So I had a little bank account growing. It was slow because you don't get paid very much, but it was growing. And I was like, where do I do with this? And that's why I started studying where to invest, and real estate just kept coming up in the books. So I bought my first house before I exited the military and moved into it. Did house hacking before that was even a thing. You know,
Wow.
I was renting out the rooms, and then I moved out of it when I was 23 and I kept it as a rental. So that long answer, but the answer to your question is I was 23 when I had my first rental property, and it just kind of took off from there.
We have a huge database of friends that are on here that are listening, that are coming from single family, owner finance, sub twos. My wife still creates sub twos and notes to today. I mean, we wrap notes. We're still in that space. What was that period looking like for you? And honestly, for me, that's some of the exciting part of real estate, of just seeing how you can different ways to take down a property. And what's funny is that there's a friend of ours that was talking about some property that they take down. And I told him, I was like, I honestly don't remember the last time I brought a bunch of cash to the table. Like, there's just different ways to structure deals where you're just not out of hundreds of thousands of dollars to acquire a property. So can you share that, of like kind of the highlight of some of the stuff? Because there might be some new people that are like, man, that's exactly where I'm at right now.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah. So looking back, I started out in foreclosures because I went to a seminar like we all
Right.
do. And it's one of those, everyone on stage selling you books and tapes, which they don't have books and tapes anymore. It's
Right.
telling you my age a little bit, but they were selling all of that, right? Coaching programs and all of that. So I spent $5,000 on this course, and I was promised a coach. And they were teaching foreclosures, and they were telling me, Gabe, how easy it was to find no equity properties, negotiate with the bank to do a short sell, which is basically just the bank accepting less than what's owed and releasing the lien. And so it's a way to negotiate equity. So you're creating value in the negotiation. I totally failed at that. So I got a
Really?
property under contract, and my coach says, and I will never forget this. He says, you need to get control of that. He says, the best way to get control is to get the title, get the deed. Little did I know that I could actually control a property with a contract and no risk at all. Right. But what I ended up doing was giving the guy $3,000. He gave me the deed to his house. So I basically did a subject to without even knowing what the heck that was,
Wow.
with an over leveraged property, and
Oh,
only 1,000 of that money was mine. So I went out and raised $2,000
wow.
from a buddy. So then I get into the situation, and I was promised from the course that this would be really easy business. So I was like, this is great. I'm going to make all this money. I'm so excited. This is my first deal. And I started negotiating with the bank. And I don't know if you've ever tried a short sell, but they're very difficult to negotiate.
Yes.
And it takes forever. That was back when there's fax machines and people were losing faxes like crazy. So you would
Wow.
fax in the package. A week later, fax in the package. A week
Right.
later, you know what I'm saying? And the pattern continues. But they ended up finally reviewing everything and telling me, no, I'm not going to do it. So what does that mean when I have
Wow.
an over leveraged property? I'm on title, but I'm not on the loan. Gabe, they ended up foreclosing and just wiping me out. So I lost 100% of that investment. And that was my first
Wow.
transaction. I learned a lot from that. And then I learned about the lease options. So here I go again with a long
Wow.
answer to your question. But what I absolutely fell in love with and where my success really took off is when I started doing a lease with an option to buy. Look, it's easy to negotiate. It's easy to understand. Sellers understand it. It's not intimidating. And it's a way that you could acquire properties very quickly with little or no money.
That's awesome. So we run a lot of different creative finance, creative real estate type groups. So hopefully those who are listening, if you're listening right now, and this is for you, Kevin might be a guy to reach out to, even though he's graduated into other higher yielding properties, and we're going to dig into that stuff of how he moved through. But this is stuff that Mark and I talk about quite a bit, of like how you can step into these different things. We still create notes. We still create a lot of these things. And that's really cool how your story is. Our story is very similar though, Kevin. Like there's a couple properties that we ran into that I'm like, how do we create revenue on these things that are just, they're kind of marginal. There's possibility. How do you do it? So it's kind of like these ninja moves, kind of this hidden art, right? Well, you started off that way, which is way different than most people, right? So most people are finding things and saying, I flipped a couple times, I've done some rentals. Well, wow, there's a whole nother strategy.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you've done some sub twos and some owner finance also.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I feel like I've kind of done it all. I've been doing this for over 2 decades now.
okay, wow. Yeah.
I started in 2001. So right when the bubble was crashing, and then, 9/11 and all of that. So that was my first experience with the recession, was my first year in the industry. And then I've been at it pretty heavy ever since then. I can't remember what your question was, but
the owner finance and the sub two. So
yeah, the owner financing. Yeah.
so now you start doing O5s and
yeah. So the owner finance can mean pretty much anything, right? You could do
right.
an owner finance where they come in a second position and they'll go into a junior lien. You could do an owner finance where it's free and clear and they just do a regular note and mortgage or a deed of trust. But a lot of people would consider a lease option or subject to owner finance also, because you're
Sure.
using financing that's in place and the owner is giving you permission to do that. So I would consider that owner financing as well. And anytime you have the owner involved in your transaction, I
That's true.
believe that's a creative strategy. So there's just a huge gamut of options when you start talking about this.
So, okay, so now you're doing that. We graduate through these things. When I say graduate, you're just learning all these different things. Tool belt is continually changing. What was the spark that you go, I think I can lend out some of my friends' money, because I think that's how it leads,
Yeah.
right? Something happens. So what happens? Like, how does this begin?
Yeah. So as I was moving through the lease options, look, lease options are fantastic. I'm not going to ever say anything negative about them. And it's hard to make money quickly with those. So it's a very slow game.
Right.
I wanted money quicker. So I started fixing and flipping and wholesaling properties, and I started borrowing hard money. And then I was having success, and it was pretty well known because of the online forums and the investment associations. I was known in those groups. So I was recruited to be a mortgage broker. This was back 2004, 2005. So
Wow.
this is prior to the 2008 crash and the SAFE Act. There was literally, Gabe, it was a wild west. There's no licensing, there's no anything. That's where all
Wow.
the problems came from, by the way.
Yeah.
But so I got involved at that time.
Wow.
And then as everything started changing in the industry, it became more and more challenging to get deals done. You know, banks were getting nervous. You started seeing takeovers and that kind of thing. So I decided to stop lending conventional money. I didn't have control of it. And then I started raising private capital. And what changed for me is one of the people that I was borrowing money from when I was doing my own flips asked me to come work for her. She took me under her wing and she introduced me to that first guy. His name is John. John had $100,000 in cash in his IRA. And he says, "Can you loan this out on a project?" So I went to a real estate sales meeting, you know, where the realtors get in front of the room and pitch their listings.
Right.
And I was at one of those sponsoring it as a lender. And I got up and said, "Hey, look, I have $100,000 in cash. I want to invest in somebody's fix and flip. Does anybody have a fix and flip? We'll finance it for you." Got like 3 leads out of that one deal because there wasn't an industry for hard money back then. So this
Right.
was like unique. Someone wants to just give me 100 grand.
Wow.
So I pulled a lead out of that meeting, that presentation, and I basically introduced John with this investor. I charged 4 points origination. I gave John 2, I kept 2. So $2,000 was that very first deal. That's how much I made on it.
Wow.
And that changed everything.
And then you're hooked.
Then I was hooked, man. And then I was like, I got to go out and find more Johns. That sounds
Yeah,
crazy, but
totally.
where's John at? So I
So
started
so
looking for John.
and that's before '08.
Oh yeah. So this was in 2006 when John and I did that very
Wow.
first deal.
So you start doing that. So what happens what happens in '08, 2010 to 2012? Like, what happens during this 4-year gap where it's just sketch, right?
Oh
And
gosh.
I mean, like, what's happening to the industry, the business of what you're doing, and how, like, I like to get takeaways of like these lessons. So those who are listening, you're actually listening to me learn, because I want to learn some of the lessons. So what was happening for you in this industry?
So the private lending was a part-time gig for me.
Okay.
And into 2007, we were doing just how I described it to you. One investor, one private note investor, one real estate investor, bringing them together and charging a fee to do that. Little did I know, Gabe, by the way, that was totally illegal what I was doing. I had to learn that the hard way, which is a fun
Okay.
story if you would like me to share that. But I was basically selling a security without a securities license is what I was
Got it.
doing. And the regulators let me know that. But I brought those together, but I wanted to evolve. So
Right.
I'm an entrepreneur, right? So I was like, how do I make this better? And what I ended up doing was taking on the loan servicing. So instead of giving John 2 points and me keeping 2, I kept all 4. And then I serviced the loan and took a small fee for that. So I was still paying the investor great. They were making 13 or 14% on their money. I was making the little 1% spread plus the points. And so I turned this little deal, this John, into a business for Susan, who was mentoring me. And so I
Got it.
had maybe 20-ish loans in the portfolio when the bank started collapsing. I remember Lehman and Bear Stearns. I could still
Wow.
hear that when that was being announced. The fear that was Susan and I had in that office, it was just her and I. It was just so much fear.
Wow.
Like literally, Gabe, you probably remember, but everything was just collapsing around us.
Yeah.
We ended up doing just fine. It was heavy communication, calling our borrowers, calling our investors. So we got through without any defaults, any foreclosures,
Gee.
anything. Now, on the personal side, I had 55 rental properties at that time in my personal portfolio. So this is outside of the private lending.
Wow.
And I took an absolute bath. Here's the lesson that I learned, and this is important. Your goals that you set are highly important. If you're a high achiever, which if you're listening to this, I'm going to put you in that category. You wouldn't be listening to Gabe and me talk right now if you weren't a high achiever. If you're a high achiever and you set goals, you try your best to hit those goals, right? That's what we do.
Right.
And so the goal that you set is very, very important. So here's my mistake, Gabe. I was setting a goals based on number of transactions, which is a very common mistake. I want to do 1 deal a month, 12 deals a year. That was a goal of mine. And so what does that mean? I start doing marginal deals just so I could hit that goal. And so I was over leveraged. I was in adjustable rate, interest only loans, the 100% stated income loans that were out there. I was in all of that just so I could hit these goals that I was trying to accomplish. And then it ended up taking me down. So I went through, I lost some properties. I lost basically everything. And I started rebuilding in 2008.
Wow, brother. Man, that is so much goodness because, this is 14 years later. Is it 14, 12 years later?
So almost, yeah, we're in the 16th year now.
16 years, yeah. 16 years later, and many people that are listening to this were not part of it. I remember being part of it, but we were doing flipping at that time, and we just got into, I'm talking flipping for other guys, like other people. That's when I learned the lesson that, not all investors, just lots of lessons. We were the rehab crews. That's really how I got started in this whole business. And so I didn't really see the financial side of it. Like, it was knowing people like you helps to keep that humility and to keep that awareness and a little bit of paranoid of what we're doing. So, wow, man, I'm trying to embrace what just happened because I feel like I walked with you through it. You did that really good job of explaining what happens then. Oh, wait, that's happening. I'm guessing that's going to take about a year or 2 years to kind of recapture, maybe 4. Like, what happens during this time?
Yeah, so this is I'm glad we're talking about this. And this is something that doesn't come up in a lot of these podcasts that I'm interviewed on. So this is interesting because here's what I did know. I did not see it coming. Okay. I was totally caught off guard and caught by surprise. I fought like hell to save as many properties as I could. I did not default on one owner. So all the defaults were with my mortgages, my banks. And I did call every single one and try to negotiate with them. But this was back before, you had a lot of these payment plans and these forbearance agreements. And it actually, a lot of that stuff came in during this time.
Right.
So they weren't working with you. They're just like, screw you. You pay or not. Basically, those are my 2 options. Well, I'm like, that's only leaving me 1 option at that time.
Right.
So, that's when it started all fall apart, but I did get through. I didn't hurt any private seller at all. The great thing about lease options though, is the way you could structure them is, and I'm going to get a little high detail here, Gabe, and tell me if I'm going way off track here, but the way I would structure these is a 1-year term that automatically renews every year. Unless the real estate investor, chooses not to renew. So it automatically renews unless you choose not to. And the reason I like that, and it proved very beneficial in this case, is every year on that month, like let's say I signed it up in a March, then the following March, I have the ability to get out of that agreement or renegotiate. So I can call all the sellers and say, look, we know the world's caving in around us. I just need to lower my payment a little bit. I need to lower my purchase price or whatever it needs to happen to make it work for everybody. So it gave me that opportunity to renegotiate all of those. So I got to keep a lot of my lease option deals without any problem. And then it's just working through it, right? What I did see, I didn't see it coming. What I did see is the opportunity. Like, when there's that much pain, look, that statistically was worse than the Great Recession.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Or it was the Great Recession. It was worse than the Great Depression. The Great Recession was statistically worse than the Depression. So I knew that there was opportunity. So I just started bringing in private credit. So instead of private money partners, I was looking for private credit partners, and I just started buying. So it was people who could have qualified because I couldn't because of what was just happened to me. I just started buying. I was buying properties for 40 grand, 50 grand that would rent for 1,200. And then now they're worth 400, 450 grand.
Goodness, brother.
I mean, so I learned, I guess I learned that there was definitely opportunity when there's pain. And that sucks, but that is reality.
What's interesting is, and this is why I like you, and I didn't know I liked you this much, but now I like you even more. You're up there on my scale now because I'm just going. Mark and I, we just did a podcast the other day, and it hasn't come out yet, but we're talking about the resilience and having the courage and to press through when things get tough. Like what happens, and we haven't really gone through a lot of tough stuff right now. But people feel like it's a tough stuff. I call it the year of the pivot. I know more business owners that are pivoting this year than ever that I've known since probably 08, 09. So there's a lot of pivoting going on in the business, right? And so you're showing us and giving us a pathway of saying, look, when this happens, you can have a juggling match on one side. But if you're optimistic enough, if you're entrepreneur enough, if you can see through the fog, see through the smoke, and you go, wait, there's fire over there, but that fire isn't my fire. Right. And that's what I think that people run into is like, if there's a fire over there, oh crap, shut everything down. I need to I need to sell all my crap too. And every now and then my mind might go into like, maybe I need to get rid of is it that bad? And if you can see through the
Right
smoke,
now.
yeah, it's happening right now in our marketplace, especially in commercial real estate. We're seeing different stuff happening, pretty much in commercial real estate. And that's one of the cool things that I am starting to see in this season also of going, no, wait a minute, where there's smoke, it doesn't mean it's your smoke. And so somehow you were able to have the wherewithal, the mindset of going, I have my fires that I have to put out, and that's my smoke and my junk. But you were also able to look at someone else's and say, I can help them. And I have the water hose, I have the fire hydrant, and I know the strategies to do it, which is perfect for this podcast because we talk about creative strategies all the time. And if you didn't have that tool belt, you wouldn't be able to acquire as much as, I mean, this is pretty much what we're talking about right now, 2024. Get a better tool belt, like change the tools.
Yeah. And you need multiple because look, I was doing lease options like crazy. I did over 150 of those. And then we hit 2008. And then as we, 2009, 2010, 2011, when everything was on a freaking clearance sale. I mean, every house was on the clearance rack.
Right.
And we're like, well, I don't need to do lease options now because they're all in foreclosure. They're all bank owned or HUD homes now. So the lease option wasn't very effective in 9, 10, 11. But what was effective was the BRRRR strategy before BRRRR strategy was a strategy, right? We were bringing in private capital, funding 100% of the acquisition and rehab, and then refinancing into permanent Fannie Mae debt during this time because that's the strategy that was working out. That is what was effective in that time.
So awesome, brother. I love hearing that story. I wish I knew more back then. I had no idea. I remember there was one property that we were looking at getting that my wife and I wanted, and it was in foreclosure. And my friend, new build neighborhood, my friend like lived the street down. And I go, dude, there's a foreclosure in your neighborhood. And I told him the cost, and he was like, hold on a second. He's literally throwing up on the side of the road, realizing you're going to buy a property that I just bought a year ago at 50%. And I'm like, well, eventually go up in value. That's how these things work, right? I don't know anything at the time. I mean, I was so green. I had no clue. But I look back now and I'm going, wow. So you do 150 of these. What happens after? So now you're taking down with other people's debt. You do the BRRRR strategy, and is all of this single family? When do you start going towards this lending mode? Is it like you cash out some of your properties and then you're like, I want to lend some of my own capital? Like, how does this, where do we go from here?
Yeah, well, remember, I had no capital. I lost everything, but I did have John, and then I had other investors that have come, and we could talk about how I raised that money, but I did have some investors because I started in 2006. So in 2008, when everything was collapsing around, Susan's like, peace out. She was losing things too. I mean, all of us got hurt that were in the industry at that time, but she panicked, right? So she exited the business. She preferred to teach real estate than actually do it. And that's not a knock because she's very, very good at it. But she just didn't want the risk. She didn't want to actually be in the trenches. I'm a deal guy. I'm like, I'll teach. And I love doing that, but I'm not going to charge for that. What I want to do is partner with you and do deals together. And that's how I make my money. So we just separated. And in 2008, that's when I started Pine Financial. So
Wow.
I was building a company, a private lending company, while I was still doing my own investments, but they tie in so closely together.
So yeah.
So the entire time, this entire time, I've been basically two tracks. I'm building Pine Financial, which is pretty successful, and I'm buying and acquiring properties and building a portfolio.
Oh my gosh, dude, I'm excited. Okay, so you do this. To be clear, okay, so this is on a really fun podcast that hopefully people consider this fun. But for those who are listening, I call up a buddy of mine. I go, hey, um, I was on Kevin's podcast the other day, and he knows quite a bit of stuff. And I thought that, honestly, I thought that you're a money lender. All right. And there's different types of money lenders. And there's money lenders who have a whole track history like you. And there's money lenders who got into the business because they know finances. And they're like, instead of doing mortgages, I'm just going to do hard money and bridge loans.
Yeah.
And I really thought that's what they are, by the way, guys. There's probably 90% of them that don't own any assets themselves, or they say they do. So I go, I have an internal feeling that Kevin's kind of a badass.
Yeah, you said that.
And what's funny is that the other person that you're really good friends with, he goes, dude, I think he's a badass too, but we don't know his whole story though. And I'm like, really? I was like, well, let's get it. Let's get this story. So anyways, it's pretty funny. So there, and we'll go through some other stuff later, but this is a great thing for people to hear. So you start just acquiring, you're doing the BRRRR model, but this is also on top of the 150 lease options you're doing before. Those things stopped. So now you're just acquiring. Is this all over? Is this in your metro area? Or you just now, I mean, that's a freaking shop to be in acquisition mode. Are you JVing with people? You have crews, you have other people. I mean, what's going on here?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I was highly focused on Pine, so that's where the majority of my interest went. But look, I'm willing to work hard, so I'll put in 60 or 70 hours in a week. So I could build Pine and do a couple of deals here and there. So did I have some crews? Yeah, I mean, I was still buying a house or two every single month, but it was all small single family houses, and I was trying to build a portfolio. Everything needed work. So we rehabbed everything we bought, and I would sell off occasionally, like just do a flip to generate some cash. But I knew if I could hold on to these properties, it would make me wealthy. So I held on to as many as I possibly could. And I still have some today. Now I did go through a divorce like 9 years ago. So I lost a lot of my properties in that process. Right. But I still have properties today that I bought in 2009 and 10.
Wow. Yeah. Those things have quadrupled, if not way more than that.
Right.
Goodness, man. So we go through that. Now we're into a season of, things kind of simmer down. We're probably in 2014 to 18-ish, and you're just building Pine at this time. There's a lot of lending going on in there in this era of life of everybody. Everyone's now saying you got gurus all over the place. It's kind of about where I started and got into it. And you guys just full throttle Pine Financial lending across the nation, or like what happens?
No, that's actually back to your original question. No, we were highly focused on Colorado, and something I don't share with a lot of people is the name of Pine. Sometimes I'll get asked, like, how'd you come up with the name? Well, I'm a Colorado kid, man. I was born here. When I went into the Army, I got stationed down in Colorado Springs.
Are you a boarder, or you just do skis?
I snowboard.
Okay,
but cool. I didn't as a kid because we didn't have enough money to do that. It's not cheap, and we couldn't afford it. So I didn't learn how to snowboard until I was an adult.
I get
but
it.
Anyway, I'm absolutely in love with this state, and so I wanted to make sure I did my business here and I did the state right, or did the state proud. So I was like, what is kind of Colorado that I could get a domain name on like that I could buy a domain name, and that's actually pretty tricky to do. So I'm thinking like Rocky Mountain, Mile High, Summit, like all these mountain things. But I'm like, there's a lot of freaking pine trees. I wonder if Pine or Pine Financial or something is available. And so I just started, and then Pine Financial, if I added the group to it, then that domain was available. So I snatched it up, and that's how Pine was born.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it was very slow and methodical process because it's so capital intensive. There was no institutional investors back then. So literally every dollar that came in was from private investors. Wow. Now we have a little bit of leverage. So 160 million in our portfolio, about that. $30 million in bank lines. So now it's getting a little bit easier. There wasn't an industry then. In fact, Gabe, this is a funny story. I thought, dude, I swear to you, I thought that I invented this thing. I thought I invented the industry. And then I go to this conference, this private lender conference, and I was like, there's gonna be like 5 people in here, and we're just gonna kind of hang out. Dude, there's like 200 people all over the nation doing exactly what I'm doing.
Wow.
And so it was like very humbling and enlightening. I was like, dude, I could learn from these people. So I just, started talking and just getting better and better. And now, now we have 19 people that work for us. And
nice.
Now we're lending in multiple states, but it's still geographically focused because there's risk if you spread out too much.
Right. Okay. So now we're back to, or we're here, we're 2020, things are changing. And I meet you, I think in 21, 22, probably 22. Commercial. This is how we meet. Yep. You doing commercial lending. Yep. I'm guessing you make a transition at some point. So let's dig into that.
Yeah, so there's a handful of people in the commercial academy, which you and I are both a part of. It's a pretty elite group of people, I would say. And I was doing business.
We're pretty cool people.
We're pretty cool. There's a handful of commercial academy members, the Diamond Group members that I was doing business with through the residential lending side of things. So I had met them through that, both in Denver and in Minneapolis. And they had graduated into the commercial, and they were always, like, pretty frequently, honestly, asking if I would help them fund some of their commercial transactions. And I was so adverse to it because I didn't understand it.
Right.
And then there was just a lot of pressure. Like, you got to come out, you got to come out. So I went to the first commercial academy, and gosh, this was probably 20, maybe 18, something like that. And I did like it, but I just didn't have the capacity. I didn't have the money to actually commit to helping more people in that industry. So I just pushed pause on it. And then, the 2 guys that I'm talking about, but they just, the pressure just kept going. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go. It's a $30,000 price per year to be part of this elite group. And you guys are promising me that I'm going to benefit from it. And I like you, I trust you. So I'm going to do it. And I'll tell you what, Gabe, it did change my life. So now we're doing commercial deals, and we're funding a lot of deals out of that group, but we've expanded beyond the group as well. But it all came down to those 2 guys and just the pressure to join this one group.
Just to level up.
Yep. Now we're still at heavy resi. I mean, that's really my bread and butter. That's my background, like yours. I understand it. It's far more liquid. So we're about 80. We keep our portfolio about 80-20 on the lending side. 80% residential. On my personal buy side, my personal portfolio side, I'm almost all commercial at this point because it's just, the profit's a lot better if you could stomach the risk.
Wow. That's really cool. Yeah, if you can stomach it. So for those who are listening, obviously you're listening to this. One of the things that I know Kevin for quite a while, got to hang out in a couple places, in these different, we've been all over the place, really. I never knew that you would never guess that we're hanging out at a tiki bar, right? Right. Which I was just talking to Brad yesterday about the tiki bar syndrome that he has.
He totally has it. So funny.
Yeah. But just the funny parts of, like, how you meet people and you have these conversations. And I didn't know all this stuff about you, dude. I knew that you ran a lending company, but to know that you have this investor background, it also gives those people that are listening, and we're going to plug you heavily in this group of, like, hey, if you need some capital for some of this commercial stuff, especially in the states that you were part of. But it matters when you're dealing with someone who understands investing. So we run, now we're running a commercial brokerage. I obviously, not just the podcast, come from single family, but do a lot of other things and do my own commercial. But it's amazing how when I'm talking with people and they're asking for properties or searches or whatever that we do, right? A big piece of land or a mobile home park, I go, listen, I own some of this stuff. I know exactly what you're going through. I can help you through some of these other hurdles also. There's a huge, huge reward to that. Instead of just going, hey, use my capital. I want to get a 4% return, or what do you call it? Points off of your stuff. And you just almost feel kind of used a little bit by lenders going, yeah, but dude, you want me to buy it. You're going to be secure. But at the same time, I'm paying you a crap load of money. Right. So there is this extra edge to it. And I actually only borrow from people now that understand real estate to some degree, unless it's just private, like totally private, and they're just going, and it's normally towards single family. But on the higher end stuff, I just don't want to explain myself over and over and over again. Dude, this story is amazing. So the way I have it is, I think you have 55 rentals at some point, almost lose them all. Then you go from, and this is through, creative strategies for those who are been doing creative strategies right now in your business, then go to almost lose it. During this fire, you go from there to now putting 160 million on a street a year. What is something that you can share with someone? Because I'm really interested. Can you highlight the power of the network that you have and how you were able to create this network? Because that's what it takes. How were you able to create a network of just relationships? I mean, was this like you hobnobbing all over town, or is it just phone calls? I mean, what does it take to be you?
Dude, it's so interesting, and this can go so many different directions, but the way you said that makes me laugh. Look, you know me, the listener doesn't, but I'm shy, dude. I'm very introverted. I'm not a good networker. I'm just, that's something that I'm trying actively to improve in. Okay. I'll just say that it's not my strength, but I'll tell you
How
what,
old are you right now?
I'm 45 tomorrow.
So, oh wow, happy birthday
Thank
tomorrow.
you. Thank you.
So guys, I will confirm, like the first, like I introduced myself to him
Yeah.
pretty much, like I felt like I had to do it 3 or 4 times to
Yeah.
be
It's
honest with
embarrassing.
you. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, would you like a drink, Kevin?
Yeah.
What are you doing for business? So that it is true, but it
Yeah.
also goes to show like, hey, even though you're 45, you're still working on yourself.
Oh yeah.
Right. So
For sure. I mean, because you're very good at it. So I look up to someone like you that I could watch work a room, and you're very good. So it's like, how do I learn from this situation? Like in the tiki bar, for example, I could just watch and see like, what's he doing? And I'm always trying to learn. Of course, we all are.
yeah.
But to answer your question, the network is hugely important. So it's something I struggle with, but I'll tell you what, if you actually give a damn, you give a shit about people, that will change everything. So my focus, I'll tell you what, my income changed drastically when I stopped caring about the commission. When I started thinking about how can I benefit this person the best, that's when I started realizing the biggest gains. And it sounds maybe cliche, maybe crazy, I don't know, but it's absolutely 100% true. So if there's one piece of advice on networking that I would give, it's you gotta actually care, which means you don't go in there and throw your card in their face. Like I never hand out my business card. I will only give you a business card if you ask for it. Now I'll ask for
I don't know
yours.
anything about you. Like, look, I know more about our families, soccer,
Yes.
sports, like everything else that we do. I didn't know that you liked boarding. I probably asked you that, but I might have forgot by then. Um, but I know that. I think I met your attorney. I met so many other people, but I really like I remember all of the stuff, and it's so true. I remember where we met. I think it was in Dallas when we first met, and it was everything about like what do you do in Houston? What's your okay, this is my family. Okay, cool. So your family grew up there, did this happen there? Like it's really more organic because in that way you're also saying, hey, like if I help you grow, what does that look like? Like I know I can help a lot of people grow right now, but what does it look like if I help you grow personally? Well, I'm really working on these things right now. My daughter's doing this, or my son's doing that, or we're looking at adding this other asset class. Well, and you're just listening, right? And you're figuring out, okay, how can I provide value to this person?
That's right. And it's way beyond business too. Like I do legitimately care. Like tell me about your kids, tell me about your family. Like I want to get to know you. If we can have if we're going to have an actual relationship, then it's going to be beyond just the business side of things, right? So when I'm in a networking room and I'm actually finally talking to somebody, I am going to ask those questions.
That went way in a different direction than I thought this whole
I
podcast
know,
would go, to
totally.
be honest with you. So
Told
this
you.
is like I didn't realize how much time has gone by. Wow. Okay, so we wanted to go over and highlight to those people that are listening, that are maybe just starting, maybe they're in commercial and they are looking to repivot. And I'm calling it the year of the pivot, right? Like this, you got to have some courage this year. It's happening right now. What are you seeing with some of your friends, and just kind of go switching directions of like our marketplace, our friends, the people we know might be pretty good, but what about you contact a lot of other folks. What's happening, and what would you advise people to be just looking out for?
Well, I would say two things. Don't panic and be careful, if that makes sense. So there's two stories here. I mean, in real estate. So you have the housing story, which is very, very confusing, right? By all, by everything that we've been taught, everything that we know, housing should be hurting, right? In fact, it's
Right.
been the Fed's mission to hurt housing. And they do that by taking liquidity out of the environment, out of the economy through quantitative tightening. I know that's a term you don't hear very often because no one wants to talk about it, but that's
Right.
just literally taking money out of the economy, right? That puts pressure on real estate. And then you have rising interest rates, which puts pressure on pretty much everything. So there, by all means, we should be feeling some pain in real estate, but we're not. In fact, we've seen appreciation of over 6% nationally. So it's very, very complicated and confusing on the housing side. And so what I'm seeing on that side is people are working really hard to find projects to do that are successful. I do think it's a good time
I
to
would agree
buy
with
it.
that.
I think always is a good time to buy. You just got to be very smart and make sure you're buying on the fundamentals and the principles and not on emotion. That's where people get themselves into trouble. Now, the second story is the commercial. Now that is feeling pain, and I think more is coming. And that is something that we all expected. And the reason for that, Gabe, like you know very well, is there's a tremendous amount of pressure on banks. These loans are coming due and they're no longer qualify for modifications or extensions or refinances because debt service coverage ratios. That's a big deal right now. Debt service coverage ratio for the listener is let's say a 1.2 DSCR means the property produces net of all expenses 120% of what it's going to cost to make those mortgage payments. And so that's pretty standard in the industry, a 1.2, 1.25, somewhere in there. Well, now we're seeing DSCRs on normal deals that are terming out, the loans that need to be refinanced because of a maturity at 0.7, 0.8. Wow. So the banks are running into some trouble with these. So now they have a couple of options. Do they lower their interest rates to get the DSCR to qualify so they're not getting hounded by regulators? Do they force the investor to bring in capital to refinance and lower the principal so that the debt service coverage ratio hits the guideline? Do they just leave everything the same and just make it non-qualifying loan on their books because the DSCR isn't working? Do they extend it the same? I mean, there's all these options, right? But none of them are good. None of the options are good. So the banks are definitely feeling some pressure. And if interest rates don't come down soon, you're going to start seeing more mergers. You're going to start seeing some more bank failures. Look, we're already seeing it. It's already happening.
Yeah.
And so I think on the commercial side, there's a lot more opportunity for investors than on the residential side. But again, there's more risk because how long is this going to last?
Right.
If interest rates stay where they are for another year or two, you're going to see some very, very challenging cap rates, which is going to make it hard to exit.
Wow.
Does that make sense? Or
Yeah,
I know I went a little higher level there, but
I love it. I love it. And I think that we all need to hear it, and we all need that reminder. And I love this as a soundbite. We'll probably cut that one up because that one's so good for us to understand. And really, you broke it down really well, what the DSCR is and what we need to be looking at as a whole when we're going into commercial. You mentioned the options that are out there, and none of them are really looking great.
None of them are great
for the lender side of it.
For the lender, for the owner of the building or the lender, right? It's good for you and I that are in acquisition mode.
We're more opportunist, not opportunity. So let's look at us from an opportunity. So again, it's a tale of two stories. I'm going to use the analogy, which I really like that you did, was, hey, while my personal house of my business was like, there was a fire there and there's smoke and I had to put that out. I'm looking at other people going, they have fire too, and they have smoke, but I'm going to have to do both, right? You're kind of working both jobs in a sense. So let's look at that other job. So there's opportunities coming. Do we know what they're going to look like?
I mean, this is a great conversation. I'd want your opinion on too, if you're open to sharing it, because look, we know that office as a whole has dropped 40% from its peak. Okay, we
Right.
know that. Now, different pockets are more and less, but the concern is if you're looking at an office building, for example, what are you going to do with it? You still have expenses. Taxes are still going to be high. Are you going to be able to get enough tenants in there to at least cover your expenses and your mortgage? And that's a question I don't know the answer to. It's a very challenging asset class. Now, is there opportunity? 100%. I 100% agree. That's probably the best opportunity right now is the office asset class. But I also think that there's risk that we don't really understand. Like, is the go back to work, back to the office movement a real thing? Because I just don't know that it is. Right now,
Yeah.
other opportunities, these are going to be opportunities in any market, but it might be magnified right now, would be any kind of repositioning or value add. So we're seeing a lot of big box go to small bay.
Right.
We have friends and I'm in these deals where they're turning malls into entertainment districts and self-storage units, and they're just repurposing complete shopping malls, right? So I think if you could repurpose something into a use that's effective today, you can make a lot of money.
Wow. That is so good. And that's some of the friends that we were talking to the other day or talking about the other day. They have some repurposing, and I'm like, wow. I mean, they're almost, I mean, the I guess I would say it's close to 1,000. No, it would be an 800% upside,
Oh yeah.
right? It would be an 8x, I think, is what they're at. And I'm like, that is freaking crazy. It's a lot of risk, but it's just the fact that it's going to happen and you can see it happening. It's really crazy. Okay, so this is really good. I don't want to take, dude, I honor your time, and I'm just watching the time now because I'm like, holy cow, we are breezing through. What is something that you can share with people that they're in commercial real estate, they're moving more towards commercial, they come from the creative world that you and I live in still today. What is something that you can like just encourage them on or help them give a perspective? Because you did mention and kind of go back, it's kind of like a panic, but also be careful.
Yeah.
Um, what is something that you're saying, hey, look, here's some of the opportunities, but what should someone do? Should they expand their network? Should they just go? I mean, not I don't want to go into like go join a group, but like what is some practical things?
Yeah. Let me start with well, let's start here. You asked me to say to encourage. The word you used was encourage. And let me tell you this, if you're in creative finance and you're in creative real estate deals and it's on the residential side, and you're looking for commercial, oh my gosh, the sky is the limit because you're dealing now with a more sophisticated seller. So
Mm,
sometimes it's hard to negotiate a subject to or a lease option with an owner occupied user on a single family home, right? Because they just
right.
don't get it.
Yeah.
And they stick their head in the sand and let it go to foreclosure, which is easier, less
Yeah.
complicated. But on the commercial side, they understand. In fact, in this environment, Gabe, we're seeing way more owner finance deals than just regular normal down payment and bank financing transactions. Owners have to get involved because of that DSCR again. Otherwise, the loans aren't going to qualify. So we're seeing more and more owner carry, owner participation. You could have an owner participate as equity in a transaction and it qualifies for bank financing. That
Mhm.
qualifies for equity in a bank financing scenario. You would never see that on the residential side. So the
No.
word of encouragement is you really do have a lot more flexibility if you get over into the commercial side. Now, it's riskier. I mean, tenants are hard. You might sit for a year vacant instead of,
Right.
3 weeks so you have to be prepared and you've got to have liquid reserves more than you would think in the commercial side. Doesn't need to be your liquid reserves. It just needs to be liquid reserves in the group. So if you're bringing in partners, you're bringing in people to help
Right.
you, as long as somebody has some wherewithal to get you through a problem, you should be okay. But make sure you have reserves and be encouraged because there's a lot of opportunity.
We talked before, I said, hey man, I want to be able to encourage people. Do you have a good, like a freaking awesome story of some of the things that you've been seeing right now of just investment properties and just commercial that's like crazy?
Crazy. So those shopping malls are the crazy ones, right?
Yeah.
And once you get the city to approve, like let's do some inside self-storage into a shopping mall, and you could turn that thing into cash flow, it's 8 times return, as you said. But you don't have to go that big. You could do small strip centers. So we have one that I just did right now, and I just took out some equity. So here's how it went. Is about a little under 100,000 feet in Illinois. And it was mostly vacant. I think it was about 60% vacant, or a little more than half of it was vacant. That's not a bankable deal. You can't finance that at a bank typically. So we came in and provided some funding for them, some bridge funding, so that they could get it turned around, right? So they did a new roof, maybe the parking lot, just some facade, some paint, and then they started just marketing the heck out of it to get tenants. They just ended up landing as a good tenant. What is that? Ace Hardware.
Got it.
That's going to be their anchor. That's going to be their anchor, and that changed the whole deal around. And so now other tenants want to come and they could just fill that up, and then they can go refinance into a permanent bank loan. And then so now we're getting paid off. All of that's great, but one of the investors wanted some liquidity. And so I negotiated a deal with him instead of buying him out completely. It's like, why don't you stay in? I'll just give you half of what you want, and I'll just take half of your share. And so now we're both in it. So now I got a little upside on it, and I don't have much risk, right? Because now it's 100% occupied. It's fully performing asset. And he got all of his money out. He only sold me half his interest, but it's 100% of his investments out.
Wow.
And he's still in. So I think that's a pretty neat story.
That is super cool. Yeah, and I know that deal. So, I mean, that's really awesome. I didn't know how it was all structured, but that's beautiful. Man, that is really cool. So, guys, you're listening to this. Thank you for listening to this podcast. You probably got a ton of information like me. I can't believe it went by this fast, dude. This was really good. Like really good, because I have like a page and a half of information that I'm just amazed at what's going on. How do we get a hold of you even more? You know, how, like, what do you do? What's your website? What's all the deal?
Yeah, here's what I want to share with your listener, if it's okay. We talked a lot about the economy here, and look, we are in uncertain times. We don't really know what's going to happen. All we could do is look into the past and try to project, right, the best that we can. Now, is it going to be exactly like we've seen in the past? No. But what is it? The term, the past rhymes. It may not repeat, but it rhymes, something like that. So look, if you look at 2008 and the crash that we talked a lot about today, Gabe, it does not resemble what we're going through today. They're not the same. So I hear that all the time. Are we going to see a crash like this? No. But if you look back even further to the real estate crash, it was a 14% decline in the early 90s. That does resemble, because that's coming out of the savings and loans with hyperinflation and hyper interest rates. So these two recessions do have some resemblance. So I wrote a whole report about that recession, comparing it to today, and what hopefully we could learn something from that and project what might happen and benefit from that. So that report I'll give away totally free. It's thepinereport.com. And then to reach me, or if you're interested in investing money or borrowing money or anything like that, it's just it's pinefinancialgroup.com.
The pinereport.com.
Yeah, thepinereport.com. Yep. Are you pulling it up right now,
buddy? Yeah, right there. Okay, cool. I got it. All right. So I have that. So I'll share that. And then also we have, let me make sure I got that. All right. And then we have pinefinancialgroup.com. And guys, this has been awesome. I appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much. Guys, if you need to get a hold of us, or if you have other ideas, if you know other people that want to be on the podcast that do commercial real estate and just have a really good story, we would like to talk to them, because we want to be able to help as many people in our community as possible. We love you guys. We'll see you guys later. Peace.
Thanks, Gabe.